Mark Holland, welcome to the House.
Thanks so much for having me. It's good to be back.
So 2 pieces of legislation. Why is the Senate legislation the wrong way to go?
Well, the Senate legislation doesn't do anything to stop animal cruelty. In fact, the only thing it does is increase sentences. The problem is we can't get convictions. In fact, only 1/4%, if you can believe it, of animal abuse complaints result in a conviction. So this bill would only deal with 1/4% of the problem. And meanwhile, Canadians see case after horrifying case of animal abuse and neglect, and they're going completely unpunished. We have laws that fall behind even nations like the Philippines. We have the worst laws of any industrialized nation, and the Senate bill would keep us there. It would keep us at the back of the pack, which makes no sense when we have a piece of legislation that I have in my private member's bill that was actually adopted unanimously by the House before, that is effective. Unfortunately, the Senate got in the way last time and blocked it being passed. We need to have that legislation brought forward. I don't care if it's my bill or if the government wants to adopt it as theirs, but we need effective animal cruelty legislation.
Your private member's bill is essentially a resurrection of a bill that was the result of a lot of compromise and consultation that's gone back a number of years.
Absolutely, and I can just talk about my own time in Parliament. I spent a long time in the last Parliament, not only working with animal welfare groups like the Humane Society and veterinarians, but also with those who are in the animal user industry. And we got broad consensus from people who are using animals for agriculture, from people who are hunting and fishing, to get them to a middle point. Because I think all Canadians are opposed to torturing animals. I mean, this really should be a motherhood type thing. And yet, where we run into trouble is with the Senate, time and again.
The Liberal-dominated Senate.
Well, yeah, but I think that the problem there is that the Senate seems to get really lost in a couple of different issues. One is this fear that, well, maybe this legislation is good, but it will lead to other legislation that might limit hunting or fishing. Let me be very clear. I fully support an individual's right to hunt or fish. That's not what this is about. This is about getting effective animal cruelty laws so that when somebody tortures an animal, we can do something about it. I'm really sick of talking to SPCA officers who go into homes and see animals being abused and neglected in horrific ways every day all across this country, and those officers can do nothing, absolutely nothing about it. It's really sickening.
What are the specific aspects, for example, willful neglect, which is a phrase used in the Senate legislation, which is not used in your bill? Why is that important, just as an example to highlight the differences between the two?
Well, I think, Kathleen, that's an extremely important example because when you talk about neglect, it doesn't matter if it's willful or not. If we get an individual, as an example, who left their dog in their backyard and left for a week, and that dog has no food and no care,
or those horses in Alberta,
or the horses in Alberta,
that's
a much better example. Or the horses in Alberta where they were terribly neglected. It doesn't matter if it's willful or not. You have an obligation and a responsibility as an animal owner to treat those animals in a humane way, whether or not you're willful in your neglect or you're just neglectful. That's up to the judge. Maybe there's different types of sentencing. If it's willful neglect, maybe it's more severe punishment. But there should be some justice had for somebody who neglects their animals, such as in that case with the horses, or in any case where somebody is just neglectful of animals. And I think one of the things we have to realize as well is that the legislation that I brought forward would really give those officers an opportunity to go after people who abuse animals. And this isn't just important for animals, Kathleen. Oftentimes you have the same houses where animal abuse occurred being the place where spousal abuse is later reported, or abuse against a child. It's a precursor of violence against human beings. Even if we don't care about animals, we should certainly care about stopping this violence that follows this type of behavior in human beings.
Now, part of this, too, is that animals wouldn't be a property as much as they would be recognized as sort of sentient creatures that fall under their own section within the criminal code, which is a fundamental change in how we look at animals. But at the same time, you talk about the concerns of hunters and fishers and farmers,
yeah,
and people who have pest control issues that they need to worry about, whether it be gophers or something else. I mean, clearly, if there was consensus, your bill would sail through.
Yeah.
But it hasn't.
It hasn't. It has gone through the House twice. It has passed through our elected body of the House of Commons 2 times with unanimous support, both times I might add. It has been the Senate that has blocked it. And so it is the Senate that's out of touch with this. It's the Senate that's trying to stop it for reasons I don't think that even have to do with this bill. I think that, again, their fear is that this might be a stepping stone legislation to something else. Well, you've got to debate each bill at a time. You can't vote down a good bill simply because you fear it might want to interfere with something else. I could not be more clear, and I think Canadians are very clear, that there are legitimate uses for animals in this country, that we're not trying to stop hunting or fishing. But I think at the same time, we feel that, that all those animals have to be treated in a humane way, in a respectful way, and that if somebody tortures or abuses or neglects an animal, there has to be a price for it.
So the Senate bill has gone a lot farther than your bill. You've managed to sort of delay things, I assume, to give yourself more time. So then when it comes up for a final vote, you would like to see members of your caucus vote against it, right? And now the NDP and the Bloc have already said...
Well, the NDP has, the Bloc, I hope will. I feel there's a lot of members of my caucus that are going to be helpful and vote against the Senate bill.
But some of them aren't
going
to be,
I know that Irwin
right?
Cotler, who's our former Justice Minister, is going to be voting against it. I know that a lot of our colleagues will be voting against it. But here's the problem. This could be fixed immediately by the government saying they're going to introduce my bill as a government bill and pass it immediately.
But they support the Senate bill.
Unfortunately, they support the Senate bill, and this is the problem, is that people need to call upon the Justice Minister and the government to stop delaying my bill, stop putting roadblocks in the way of effective animal cruelty legislation, and introduce something in the House that could pass unanimously overnight, and demand to the Senate, in the same way they did to the crime bill, that they pass it as well. And we could have this whole thing done in a month if there was any will on the part of the Conservative government to do so.
But in a minority parliament, Liberals can do this too.
Well, we can't.
If you have enough of them on side.
My bill is there. I have 100% support in my caucus for my bill. The NDP supports my bill. The Bloc supports my bill. The government won't allow us to get to a vote.
So they have to vote. All the people who support your bill have to vote against the Senate bill.
Well, that's what I'm trying to convince them of. I think where there's been some confusion is people can say, oh, well, we can vote for both. You know, at least the Senate bill is something. It's a step on the way to progress. What I've been explaining is that the purpose of this Senate bill is to undermine effective animal cruelty legislation. The Senate has only put this forward for one reason, and that is because they voted down twice animal cruelty legislation. They're looking for cover. They're looking for a way to...
It's a Liberal senator, though.
Well, it doesn't matter. I'm here about animal cruelty, and and what I say to people is it doesn't matter what stripe it is. I mean, this really should be a motherhood issue. This should not be a partisan issue. Whoever is advocating effective animal cruelty legislation, I'm going to work with, and if whoever is standing in our way, I'm going to oppose. And I mean, I think that's what people expect on this kind of issues. They expect us to drop partisanship and just get it done. And this is something that I think 9 out of 10, maybe even more Canadians would say, wow, Parliament isn't doing something on this, hasn't done something for over 110 years. We've got animal cruelty laws that are the worst of any industrialized nation. I think people are just shocked by that. And this is an example where Parliament has really failed Canadians, and of all stripes, and that's something that we have to address.
Mark Holland, thanks very much for this.
Thanks, Kathleen.